Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to AJ 102. This is going to be the audio lecture on Chapter 5, talking about patrol and the phrase the backbone of policing. And the patrol division, for better lack of words, is the largest portion or piece of pretty much any police department. Therefore, since they are the first responders, they're out there in the cars, driving around, answering calls, patrolling, doing things like that. They truly are considered to be the backbone of any police agency. And to quote a statement by Chief Justice Warren Burger, the police officer working the beat makes more decisions and exercises broader discretion affecting the daily lives of people every day and to a greater extent than a judge will exercise in a week. And basically saying that, hey, these officers are out there 24/7 handling all of the calls, and they truly are the first responders of any organization. So as we move into this chapter is going to begin with a discussion of the responsibilities of the patrol officer. The structure and the management of patrol and the types of patrol most frequently used, because there are different ways to do different things depending upon what the issues are that you may be facing in your community. This is followed by a description of activities commonly engaged in while on patrol and common methods of patrol, because again, there are different ways to patrol. Next, we'll talk about an important subset of patrol, the responsibilities of, say, the traffic officer, including the tasks of directing and controlling traffic, enforcing traffic laws, and assisting and investigating in traffic-related crashes. And then we'll finish up the chapter with a discussion about educating the public as it results to traffic programs. And I think the reason that a pretty heavy emphasis is placed on traffic is because that does tend to be one of the things that a lot of citizens see daily when they drive around: congestion, traffic, crashes, and what type of enforcement or educational programs are these communities putting out there. So I think that's why there's a pretty heavy emphasis on that. So in the next 35 to 40 minutes, we'll try to cover all those things. So by way of introduction, patrol can contribute to each of the common goals of police departments, including preserving the peace, protecting civil rights and the civil liberties of others, enforcing the law, preventing crime, providing services, and solving problems. Unfortunately, in many departments, patrol officers have the position with the least amount of prestige. Not necessarily the lowest paid, but if you're in the patrol division, you may not get some specialty pay that might be available in other assignments. And sometimes the least consulted, and oftentimes maybe taken for granted, because that's where you start. Just like any other business, if you come in, you don't start at the top, you start at that lower level, and that's the patrol position. But again, the patrol officers do make up the largest part of the department and truly are the backbone of any organization. Keeping that in mind, many patrol officers do strive to kind of move either up by seeking promotion or looking for some area of specialization that not only can change what position they're in, of course, so moving from patrol to, say, gangs or narcotics, but sometimes there is enhanced pay and even the appearance of greater prestige with that assignment, like detectives. So that would be a really good example of something like that. So patrol is the most vital component of police work. They are the ones, again, that are out there 24/7, handling all of the calls for service and dealing with all of those individuals on a daily basis. Patrol can contribute to each of the department's goals, which they do. Patrol officers have the position with, and it says here the least prestige, but it's just kind of where you start. So, and not necessarily the lowest paid either. There are other components like education and some specialty pay that can go up with that. But moving down to the bottom here, you can see many patrol officers do, after a certain amount of time, want to kind of specialize. They want to work gangs, they want to work drugs, they want to work detectives or community services or some other area. So that definitely is something that takes place. When it comes to responsibilities, traditionally, the responsibilities are as listed here: providing continuous police service, and we'll kind of touch on these a little bit more in a second. Conducting high visibility law enforcement, deterring crime and maintaining order. The patrol function has become very much more complex than it used to be. And, you know, the officers, there's a personal stake in the welfare of their particular patrol beat or what have you. Traditionally, kind of moving back and then going forward again, patrol has been responsible for providing continuous police service and high visibility law enforcement to deter crime and maintain order. Progressive departments also emphasize partnering with the community to solve problems related to crime and disorder. In addition, patrol officers must really understand federal, state, and local laws in which they are sworn to uphold, and use good judgment in enforcing them. In recent years, and we have to take note of this, our society has become more diverse. Many informal social controls have broken down, and information technology has really kind of proliferated, basically making the patrol function more complex and critical to accomplishing the department's mission. And what they're really saying here is that, 30, 40 years ago, you didn't have the type of technology that you have in the cars that you do now. Now, when you get into a police car, it's like a little office complete with all kinds of computers, the ability to read fingerprints out in the field, the ability to swipe a driver's license and get someone's personal information, the ability to issue a citation from an iPad or from a very small portable device, to email and get pictures and all types of other information. So this stuff is just amazing how it has progressed, and it's becoming more and more high tech, if you will. Not the phrase, as we kind of move on to this, taking a stake in welfare in their own kind of area that they work, the phrase "not on my watch" comes to mind. It's a phrase that's often used by police officers. The patrol function is the most visible form of police activity, and individual patrol officers represent the entire police department. The tasks that they are expected to accomplish are almost overwhelming. Patrol officers' specific responsibilities in most police departments are to enforce laws, investigate crimes, prevent criminal activity, and provide day-to-day police service to the community. The specific duties involved in fulfilling these responsibilities can vary and be complex, and the size of the department really often dictates what functions are assigned to patrol. So there may be more than just meets the eye. As protectors, patrol officers promote and preserve order, respond to requests for service, and try to resolve conflicts between individuals and groups. As law enforcement enforcers, a key duty of the patrol officer is to protect constitutional guarantees. A second duty is to enforce federal, state, and local statutes. Patrol officers encourage voluntary compliance with the law and seek to reduce the opportunity for crimes to be committed. So not only that, patrol officers also serve important traffic control functions, and some departments have a separate traffic unit, but the beat officer still handles a lot of traffic functions on a day-to-day basis. When you look at managing this big group of individuals, patrol operations, management of patrol involves overseeing three major spheres of activity: which kind of often occurs simultaneously. The three major spheres that we're talking about of patrol activity are: number one, responding to emergencies and calls for service, because they are in fact the first responders. Number two, undertaking activities to apprehend suspects of crime. And number three, engaging in strategic problem-solving partnerships with the community to address long-standing or emerging problems of crime and disorder. So these things always kind of happen at one time, and they overlap, and it's kind of a continuous cycle. But these are things that as a patrol officer you're definitely going to be involved in. Traditionally, patrol officers have been assigned to a specific time and specific geographic location, or what we call a beat, typically of equal geographic size, and these assignments tend to rotate. So, for 6 months you might be assigned to a particular patrol beat, and then maybe the next 6 months you might be moved somewhere else. Beats are set up of equal geographic size to pose obvious problems, because the workload is not the same at all hours of the day or in all areas. So some parts of the city are busier than others. Several attempts have been made to overcome the problems inherent to equal shift and beat size staffing. Some departments, usually larger ones, assign officers according to the demand for services, concentrating the officer's time where it's most needed. Although sometimes this is very, very difficult to do. There are some software programs that are available to help with deployment of patrol personnel, and sometimes beat lines are kind of drawn to match natural neighborhoods identified through other means. Another important decision is what type of patrol to employ. So when you kind of look at it, when you look at beat sizes, if one area of the city is really super busy, with a lot of calls, a lot of demand, maybe a higher crime area than another particular area, you have to be able to handle all the calls for service in that one area, as well as still police the other area. And that can become problematic. So you could see how maybe someone might want to just throw all the resources at the area that seems to be busier. And that's not always the best thing to do. So when we look at techniques and strategies, and we look here under categories, there's a couple of them that kind of stick out that we're going to talk about. General and random patrol. Patrol is often categorized as either general or specialized. Both general and specialized patrols seek to deter crime and apprehend criminals, as well as provide the community with satisfaction with the services provided by the police department. General patrol does so by providing rapid response to calls for service. Specialized patrol does so by focusing its efforts on already identified problems. So, give you a little bit more meat on this one. General patrol is also referred to as preventative patrol, random patrol, and routine patrol. The term routine patrol should not really be used, however, because there's nothing really routine about patrol. The challenges of general patrol change constantly. The patrol officer may be pursuing an armed bank robber in the morning and giving a talk at some kid's elementary school in the afternoon. So it's never really routine. And a myth that is out there is that it is protocol for police officers to respond to every emergency call with lights and siren, and that's TV. It's not. In reality, there are times where you may need a more tactical approach, so you don't respond with lights and siren, or the call may not be significant or high enough on the call scheme in order for you to roll with lights and sirens. So also kind of note, traditionally patrol has been random, reactive, and incident driven, and focused on rapid response, and that has kind of changed a little bit, and I'll explain later, to where we're using data to focus in on where crimes are actually happening. So traditionally, patrol officers begin their shifts on random patrol, meaning they kind of go out and they drive around their areas to see what's going on, in vehicles, of course, in hopes of detecting, intercepting crimes in progress, deterring crime by creating the illusion of police presence or being in the area and able to respond to an in-progress call quickly. Preventative patrol is generally done by ununiformed officers moving at random through assigned areas. Because officers usually decide for themselves what they will do while on preventative patrol, this time is often referred to as kind of non-committed time, meaning that they're out there doing kind of special enforcement, if you will. There's a term out there called extra patrol, which is typically used when a specific type of crime has occurred several times in an area, and there's a high probability that it could continue or occur again. So the officers will basically carve out some time to patrol an area. So an example would be a park that may have gang activity at night or people drinking or whatever, and it's always occurring. So the officers can basically log an extra patrol and go by and check on that park to make sure that this type of crime isn't occurring. Now, there was a really significant experiment that occurred years and years ago. It's called the Kansas City experiment. Excuse me. And it kind of goes like this. A serious challenge to random patrol came about 30 years ago in the findings of the often cited Kansas City patrol experiment. Funded by a grant from the Police Foundation, the Kansas City Preventative Patrol Experiment of 1972 is often deemed as the most comprehensive study of routine preventative patrol ever undertaken. Now, I have to say that there have been some more updated experiments, but we're just talking about this one for now. The basic design divided 15 beats in Kansas City into 3 groups. Group 1 was a reactive beat, 5 beats in which no routine preventative patrol was used. Officers responded to calls for service only. Group 2, control beats, 5 beats that maintain their normal level of routine preventative patrol. Group 3, proactive, 5 beats that doubled or tripled the level of routine preventative patrol. And at the end of the day, the study found that decreasing or increasing routine preventative patrol, as done like in this experiment, had no real effect on crime, citizen fear of crime, or community attitudes toward the police on delivering police services or response time. Now, again, there have been some other studies that have been done, and we'll talk about those kind of later on as we move into some of the other chapters. So now we'll talk a little bit about patrol techniques and strategies, and we'll look at some categories, and we're just going to briefly touch on these because, again, I need you to read your textbook and kind of fill in the blanks because I can't cover everything in a matter of, say, 35 or 40 minutes. So we'll start off with directed patrol. Directed, or what they might call aggressive patrol, focuses on high crime areas or specific offense types. Directed patrol uses crime statistics, remember I talked about that earlier, to plan shift and beat staffing, provide more coverage during times of peak criminal activity and in high crime areas. So basically we're running stats to find out when and where and what time basically these crimes are happening, and we're staffing accordingly based on those. And that's a really good way to basically deploy your personnel. So moving on, then there's this thing called diffusion of benefits, and that basically is, in essence, stating that crackdowns can reduce crime and disorder outside the target area or reduce offenses not targeted in the crackdown. So what happens a lot of times when you do a specialized or directed patrol area, you're going to get kind of a residual effect, and you may be going after, say, people that are doing burglaries at night, but the presence of your officers and the shift deployment and the amount of stops that you're making in the neighborhood, whatever, might actually kind of bleed not further out in the zone that you're targeting, but also inside that zone, and stop and deter other crimes. So it's this kind of thing that they call diffusion of benefits, and again, can reduce crime and disorder outside of that target area, or even get rid of some crimes that are actually in the target area. So, if there's people that are out there that are going to vandalize things, and you're out there on a burglary detail and they know that you're out there doing this, they won't do that. Therefore, you've kind of eliminated a crime there. Hotspots we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, but a key to directed patrol is identifying hotspots in your beat, your patrol area. And basically a hotspot is a specific location with high crime rate. And crime analysis, which is what we use to kind of help us identify these hotspots. So crime analysis using mapping, geographic information system, CompStat, and we'll talk about CompStat in a minute, can help you identify hotspots or specific problem areas to target your directed patrol. So data-driven approaches to crime can also bleed over into traffic. So you can use the same thing for traffic crashes. So an example would be, instead of running all the crime information in a certain area for robberies, you run it for car crashes. And you can use that same type of thought process on where are all my crashes happening and why are they happening there, and deploy people accordingly. And that's, I mean, so you can see how this whole thing will help you work on, identifying places and deterring crime and reducing crime. And the last thing on the slide right here we talk about is CompStat real quick. CompStat, short for computer statistics or comparison statistics, was developed by the New York City Police Department back in about 1994 and was credited with bringing crime down by about 80% in the years following its adoption. In essence, CompStat targets police resources to fight crime, strategically revolutionizing the patrol function. And basically, it's based on 4 different principles. The first one is accurate, timely intelligence, the information that you're getting. Second would be rapid deployment of personnel and resources, meaning that once you've got the info, you're deploying your people immediately. Effective tactics was the third one. And then fourth, ongoing follow-up and assessment to make sure that you've gone out there and dealt with the problem. Well, is it still going on, or have you sort of started to reduce the problem? So here's just kind of a couple of other definitions that go along with what we're talking about. So crime hotspots are areas on a map that have high crime intensity. They're developed for researchers and analysts to examine areas in relation to crime. And when you kind of look at it, this is what a hotspot map looks like. So when you see this, you can see here, this is a map of Los Angeles, Culver City, and some of the LA area, but the really dark red parts would be the more concentrated crime areas. And then you can define these even further by crime type. So you can see how it would kind of help you. Data-driven policing falls under that CompStat thing. So CompStat is a combination of management philosophy and organizational management tools for police departments. Came after, from the New York Police Department to really look at accountability processes and taking these numbers and targeting enforcement in certain areas based on the numbers that you're finding. We talk about crime analysis. I mentioned that just very quickly. This is something that a lot of departments have. This is CrimeView Dashboard. It's from ESRI in Redlands. They're the company that puts this out. This is actually a screenshot of a computer in a Rialto Police Department police car, and in the dispatch center, and in the sergeants and briefing rooms. And there's different ways of looking at different types of crime. So this is like a photo of burglary. So if you look at the center, the top one on the center where you see the little bubbles, that's a screenshot of a particular area looking at incidents within a certain boundary. So you can look at all of these things in different maps and different ways to try to isolate crimes on when they're happening. Look down below that. You can see a bar graph that has Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you can see when these types of crimes are occurring. You look to the left, it shows you different part ones during the times that they're happening. All the way to the right at the bottom, that's a hotspot map. So these are available on some officers like tablet. You can even look them up on your phone, but they're on the computer in the car, and it really does help the officers figure out where crimes are occurring. So here's a snapshot of basically different types of crimes that are occurring in this particular area. And each one of those icons has an image on it, and it'll tell you that it's either a robbery or a car theft or something similar. Predictive policing is a little bit different. It refers to the usage of predictive and analytical techniques in law enforcement to identify potential criminal activity. Predictive policing methods fall into 4 general categories: methods for predicting crime, methods for predicting offenders, methods for predicting suspects' identities, and methods for predicting victims. And when we kind of look a little bit more, it's the essence of crime analysis again. Here's a software that they call Predpol, predict crime in real time, and basically as crimes come in, they're mapped in this 24/7 crime center. This is from Dallas PD, and you can see that they're identifying crimes by type, by location, by density, and this is really good information that you can put out to your patrol officers. Real quick, intelligence-led policing, ILP, is a policing model built around the assessment and management of risk. Intelligence officers serve as guides to operations rather than operations guiding intelligence. So it's another form of data-driven policing, but looking more at intel. And I'll let you read up a little bit more on that. Evidence-based policing is the last one we'll talk about quickly. Is an approach to policy making and tactical decision making for police departments, and basically advocates of evidence-based policing emphasize the value of using statistical analysis and research to help guide policy and deployment of officers and things like that. So now we're going to kind of have to hurry a little bit since we spent a few minutes on that. Activities while on patrol. Well, while on patrol, officers respond to calls for service and emergencies, undertake self-initiated tasks or investigations, perform administrative duties, so they do all that stuff. First responders need important information to fight crime and save lives, and yet information always fails to make it past the dispatcher or public safety dispatchers. And again, that dispatch center, that communication center, is really the heart and soul of the organization, because that's where all the information and intel comes from. So when you talk about first responders, those are patrol officers in the dispatch center that gives them the information. Calls for service, there are basically two. There's incident driven, and then there are some different response strategies when it talks about that. So let's take a second and focus there. The two-way radio, believe it or not, that radio has made the service call an extremely important element of patrol. It has made it necessary to prioritize call. A radio dispatch almost always take precedence over other patrol activities. So an example might be if somebody has if there's, say, a report of a stolen lawnmower, well, that call might sit in the queue for a little bit because if there's an in progress call, then officers need to get out there and handle that first. So in most departments, calls for service drive the department, a response known as incident-driven policing, meaning that if you get a call, you respond to the incident, because 40 to 60% of patrol officers' time is spent responding to calls for service. The way police respond to such calls significantly affects every aspect of their function. The response has traditionally been reactive, incident-driven, and as quickly as possible. Many departments have found that differential response strategies suiting the response to the call are much more effective, and basically meaning sometimes you have to prioritize your calls. Or if it's a report call, can that person maybe log onto their computer and do their report online? Or do they have to have a police officer? Can we send out a community service officer, non-armed civilian, that could take a basic report? So sometimes those are ways that you can do to reduce kind of calls for service and things like that. Moving on real quick, self-initiated tasks. Well, that's kind of self-explanatory. Officer-initiated activities usually result from officers' observations while on patrol. They encounter situations that require their intervention, immediate attention. An example could be a traffic stop on a vehicle code violation, or some type of crime in progress, or somebody that looks like they might need help. A lot of time, this is, officers spend time doing things like this. And then, of course, administrative duties. That includes things like preparing and maintaining the patrol car, transporting prisoners, writing reports, testifying in court, all of these other things, officers do. So these are administrative duties that officers have to handle all the time. Methods of patrol, basically, the slide is captioned here, fulfilling responsibilities, but we're just going to kind of go through very quickly some different methods of patrol, and I'm not going to dig down too deep because you can I think you can all kind of get this. Patrol can be accomplished by foot, automobile, motorcycle, bicycle, Segway, horseback, aircraft, boat, or some other specialized vehicle like an ATV, a snowmobile, a wave runner, depending upon where you're at. The most commonly used and most effective patrol is usually a combo between, say, vehicle and foot patrol. So I'm not going to go through and tell you what foot patrol is, but that's been around for a long, long time. Way back when policing was still starting out, officers walked foot beats, and but the combination of those two things are extremely effective. Automobile patrol, we know that. Motorcycle patrol, you'll see a lot of motorcycles for traffic divisions because they tend to be a little bit more, they can get through traffic quicker. They're more maneuverable, easier to pull vehicles over. Bicycles, a great way for not only increasing community relations, but riding a bike as a law enforcement officer not only gives you exercise, but you can sneak up on people and they really don't even know that you're there because they're not expecting a bike rider to come up on them. Air patrol, water patrol, depending upon, if you have a lake or you're near the coast. Special all-terrain vehicles, combination patrol. We talked about that, vehicle and foot. Those are the best. And then high visibility versus low visibility. Well, kind of what do we mean by high versus low? High visibility patrol is often used in high-risk crime areas in hopes of deterring criminal activity. In addition, high visibility patrol gives citizens a sense of safety, justified or not. So if there's a lot of police officers driving around through the neighborhoods, people tend to, kind of one of two things. They're going to feel safe because the officers are there, or they're going to wonder what's happening in the neighborhood. Methods of high visibility patrol include foot patrol, especially with a canine maybe out there, marked patrol cars, motorcycle, helicopter, etc. Low visibility patrol is often used to apprehend criminals engaged in targeted crimes. Many specialized patrol operations would fall into this category. So if your narcotics officers are surveilling a narcotics suspect, or your burglary team is following some burglars, those are things that would kind of fall into the lower areas. So moving on a little bit and talking about traffic, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but it is important because this is very close to patrol, and a lot of officers do this. The traffic law enforcement is the most frequent contact between police and otherwise law-abiding citizens. It is a critical responsibility of officers. Think about it. The amount of traffic stops that might be made for vehicle code violations, or even pedestrian violations, or responding to crashes, they're out there contacting people all the time. So this type of thing has existed for more than a century. It really is, in essence, that first line of contact between officers and the citizens that they serve. So it's a critical responsibility to enforce those traffic laws. And one myth that's out there, and I thought I'd dispel it now, are that traffic laws do not apply to police officers who are on duty, and that's really false. So now, while there are some things that officers have that protect them, police officers who violate traffic laws while on duty without just cause can be held accountable for the same enforcement as the general public. So this primary goal of traffic law enforcement is to produce voluntary compliance with traffic laws while keeping traffic moving safely and smoothly. Add on to that, a substantial number of crimes are stopped or discovered by police enforcing traffic in a proactive way. Traffic enforcement is one of the best crime fighting tools in the police arsenal, because you would be surprised at the amount of things that you find on a routine traffic stop. All uniformed officers should enforce traffic laws because of the potential for not only apprehending suspects or apprehending a felon or stopping a crime, but making sure that we are making our streets quite a bit safer and what have you. The term selective enforcement, which we'll see if we get to it next. Okay, so we're going to kind of go there. I'll catch up to that in a second, but I want to get this out. Selective enforcement really refers to kind of specific crashes or high crash areas where you're really out there enforcing things. Seatbelt violations, talking on your cell phone, texting while driving, those are certainly things that fall underneath that selected enforcement. Frequently called upon for traffic, directing traffic flow, parking control, providing escorts, removing abandoned vehicles, crowd control, all of these things are pretty self-explanatory. Enforcing the traffic laws, we talk about traffic enforcement and the apprehension of criminals. We just kind of went over that. We just talked about selective traffic enforcement, meaning that we're going to be looking at certain types of things that are going on. So I talked about texting while driving, which is the big one. Driving under the influence, talking on your cell phone while driving, all of those things, not wearing your seatbelt, that could be selective traffic enforcement. Speeding, red light running, driving too fast in construction zones, all of these things could be selective enforcement because there's this particular issue going on. Some of these we already talked about, use of seatbelts, aggressive driving and road rage, driving under the influence, distractions, all of these things add up when you talk about selective enforcement. And these are ways that you can educate the community first, get them on board with what's happening, and then you start to do enforcement on these things to try to minimize some of the things that are taking place. Assisting at and investigating traffic crashes. Well, that's a lot of departments have a traffic division with motor officers and traffic officers that will come out and take crashes, but there are a lot of departments that the patrol officers handle that duty as well. So some of the responsibilities of the officer called to a crash scene would be, of course, to render first aid, to take a crash report, if the policy states that you need to take a report under certain circumstances, reconstructing it. A lot of times these traffic officers will attend various schools and become extremely proficient in recreating or reconstructing a crash to really find out what happened. So there are a lot of different ways to do it and a lot of different things that you can use to help you. So videotaping a crash scene to help establish the facts and help deal with lawsuits, insurance cases, and criminal cases that involve vehicular issues. In video reconstruction, sometimes you make models or you actually do computer recreations. There's a lot of software programs that are out there now that will help you recreate crash scenes that you can also use in the field as a patrol officer for, say, a homicide scene or a shooting scene or a larger scene to help you recreate a scene to take to court to be able to show the jury on what exactly took place. Educating the public is a huge responsibility for the entire department, specifically traffic safety or the traffic division. A lot of officers and police departments as well basically work with local school programs to enhance these types of traffic safety programs. A lot of private organizations like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, we engage with a lot of service clubs and safety councils in order to kind of educate the public on different things that are taking place. It's a very high public relations value. So an example that we did several years ago when there was an issue we found with parents not putting their kids in car seats, we would do car seat inspections. And we would do them in the parking lot in conjunction with a large grocery store, and people could pull in, have the officers look at the car seats, make sure they're in working order, show them how to properly use it. And if they didn't have a car seat, we would donate one to them, and therefore they could put their kid in a car seat and make sure their children were safe. So you could see the public relation value in something like that we are providing to the community. So in summary, and again, there's more that you should read in your book, but we're kind of coming up on the 40-minute mark. So all of the operations performed by the police, specifically patrol, is vital. While on patrol, officers respond to calls for service and emergencies. They do self-initiated tasks such as investigations and stops. to catch criminals and deter crime. And they also have administrative things that they have to do. And lastly, the primary goal of traffic law enforcement is to produce voluntary compliance with traffic laws while making sure that traffic is moving safely and smoothly. And there you have it. So that will conclude Chapter 5. And if you have any questions, you can post them on the general discussion board. Otherwise, I will talk to all of you, or I won't see you, but I will talk to you all next week. All right? Take care, and we'll see you next week.